We're here, we're queer, and we love the Lord. That's right, you're listening to Coming Out Christian, a podcast about life at the intersection of queer identity and Christian faith. This fun, faithful, and sometimes irreverent podcast is a production of Love Boldly, an Ohio-based nonprofit creating spaces where LGBTQIA+ people can flourish in Christianity. I'm one of your hosts, Siobhan Boyd Nelson, and my co-host is the Reverend Dr. Ben Hillscamp, Executive Director of Love Boldly. So join us, and let's find out who's coming out today. Hello, Ben. How are you today?
Doing well, Siobhan. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. I believe this is episode 5 of Coming Out Christian. And we are definitely getting into the spring weather. Are you enjoying it?
Oh, immensely, immensely.
Really? Yeah. I'm a big lover of spring, but my wife is not. Let me tell you why. My wife has horrible allergies. So spring is just, just kind of a miserable season for them. Also, they're from Louisiana. And so spring, I have learned, is not a season that exists everywhere across the country. Spring is definitely a Midwestern season. In Louisiana, it just kind of goes from being about 40, 50 degrees to being 80 degrees in about a week. And then they just have this like super elongated summer. So a month of 50, 60-degree weather is just very confusing for my wife. Whereas I love it. I'm like, oh, this is where we wear all the spring clothes, right? Which are distinct from the summer clothes. Am I the only that you're nodding your head, Ben, but
Good. I totally hear that. I mean, remember, I lived in Tennessee for 4 years. I went to college in Tennessee. I worked in North Carolina for a year. I mean, that's what I hated about the weather in Chapel Hill, was that my two favorite seasons, spring and fall, just didn't happen. It was
right.
just summer, a week of something that kind of approximated fall, and then winter,
Hmm.
and then something that kind of felt like spring, and then summer.
Right. Right. And so you are like me, you want those 4 distinct seasons.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Okay. So I am an Ohio girl through and through. Sounds like you are an Ohio boy through and through, Ben. All
Yes,
right.
indeed.
All right. Well, let's get started here and rope in our guest and see what they think of the seasons. If they like having 4 distinct seasons and 4 distinct wardrobes. Also, I'm gonna just be a little bit girly there, and say a little bit of a clothes horse. And I love 4 distinct wardrobes. Our guest today is Z Boyer, who is the director of community programs at Stonewall Columbus. Prior to joining the Stonewall team in January of 2021, Z worked as an educator and event coordinator in both higher education and healthcare. She worked with the Cleveland Clinic and has also been an assistant director of student engagement and inclusion at Columbus College of Art and Design, as well as being a freelance queer educator. As a representative of Stonewall, Z currently co-chairs the Short North Alliance Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access Council, serves on COSI's Center of Societal Inclusion, also has the initials C.O.S.I, love that, and serves on Columbus Public Health's LGBTQ plus Health Coalition. Z earned her Bachelor of Arts majoring in art therapy from Capital University and her master's in education with a focus in leadership and higher education from Baldwin Wallace University in Berea. She resides here in Columbus with her husband and their cat named Kitten, which I love, and a horde of various houseplants, which would all die in my house. So, congratulations, Z, for being able to raise plants. Welcome, Z. Welcome.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. My husband is going to hear this, and houseplants really kicked off during the pandemic when I was unemployed. And so that was my everything. And then over the past 4 years, it's slowly been a decline to where he is now like, he feels the plant screaming. So he's like adjusting grow lights and pouring water and things. So I haven't completely given up, but I might be one of those neglectful mothers, but
Oh,
it is what it
yeah.
is.
It is
Thank
what it is.
you. Yeah.
You
So
tried.
I do love four distinct seasons, and I 1000% agree with the top tier being spring and fall. I love a temperate moment where you can, what is the Miss Congeniality quote of like April something where it's like you can wear a light jacket or you can take it
Yes.
off. So I love layers, and layers are great for the winter. There are nothing that can happen in an Ohio summer, or especially a somewhere where it might be a little bit more humid. But definitely top tier for me is fall. Spring, she's pretty rainy, but I do love seeing all of the buds and things, even if my allergies don't agree. But that's what Zyrtec's for.
That's right. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Get out there, smell those flowers. Well, Z, when we start off our episodes with our guests, we like to hear your testimony, and that really is just your story of the at the intersection of queer identity and faith.
Yeah, so I'm really lucky that I've had the opportunity with Love Boldly to share my testimony now that I am the wings have leveled out on the plane when it comes to me and faith. I grew up in Appalachia with two Pentecostal ministers for parents who are still practicing Pentecostal ministers in the International Pentecostal Church of Christ, I'll have you. So growing up in the church, I deeply tied to music is a big part of my experience within the church. In high school, I went to one of those heathen non-denominational churches, as my parents would call it. And I was in a praise and worship band. And growing up, I always sang for, Mother's Day, Father's Day, all of those. And pretty much, I'm now able to recognize that I wanted to excel as a vocalist so much within the church because that was almost like my penance for, whatever was happening that I didn't have words for that I now know as being trans and being a queer person. So that for many, many years didn't feel great, as you can imagine, being a trans person, a trans femme from Appalachia. So religion for me did not always have a great relationship. When I moved to Columbus for college, I even went so far as to join what I thought was the Christian fraternity on campus, but it ended up being it was co-ed, so that made me feel a little bit more comfortable. But I found out that they were founded on Christian values, as well as I had never encountered a Lutheran before. And Capital is chock full of Lutherans. And I didn't know that there
Well,
were
wait,
affirming.
Capital is a Lutheran school. I know this
I
because
did
my
that
best
part.
friend is Lutheran and she knew all about Capital here in Columbus.
So I didn't choose it because of the affiliation. I did it because at the time it was the only undergraduate program for art therapy. So I had never really encountered them in terms of having a faith discussion, and then I found out that at least the Lutherans that I were with were so affirming, and many of them queer and openly queer and being people of faith. And that kind of turned my world upside down. And the final nail in the coffin, I took again liberal arts school. So there was a required religion course. And the one that I took was taught by a political refugee from Israel. She was kicked out for starting a revolution regarding, I think it was Our Mother's Sons was the translation, but essentially was standing against the required military service for everyone when they didn't agree with the apartheid that was happening within the physical area. And so she was never allowed to go back to her homeland. And she spoke about Christianity as well as Judaism in a way that I'd never heard it talked before. And the kicker for me was the story of Jonathan and David, and thinking of the translation that is there is no way to not translate that, to not say that those boys weren't fucking, like they were fucking. And not only was it just physical, they had an emotional relationship. And so that was kind of like the oh my God, me you same moment with hearing that. And I think for me, I had ignored the kind of head voice of a deity of whether it be the universe or if it's going under the moniker of God. I had kind of ignored that voice and that intuition for so long, but I kind of had a light bulb moment in the basement of Kearns, which if anyone's from Capitol, they'll know that that's the little chapel that has classrooms in the basement. I had that light bulb moment of, you know what? Not only is this okay, I've documented it for you, and they've tried to hide it. But I put you in this space, in this class, because there were multiple religious classes I could have taken, and I chose late, of course, because, ADHD, procrastination. So I got the last religion class that I could, but the universe put me in the right place at the right time to hear the message that I needed to receive. And so from that, I kind of have just been on a journey since being 21 and being in that class. So for 12 years now, have just been really figuring out. I haven't been wrestling God. I think it's been more of I've been observing. So instead of getting in the ring and wrestling God, it's been more of I've just been not tuning it out, not tuning out internal intuition, not turning out possibilities of, hey, just because the flavor and the menu that you were given within what Christianity was ascribed to be doesn't mean that that's the end all be all, which was how faith was presented for so long. And so now, as someone who has started to, over the decade or so that I've been out dipping my toe into witchcraft and understandings of esotericism, and some of that really did start with my studies within art therapy, with symbols, archetypes that come throughout cultures. Some of it's religious, some of it ends up being cultural, that for one culture is religious, and for another, it's just a symbol within their culture. Um, so for me, it was just seeing the through line of there are so many different archetypes, whether you call it faith or whether you call it intention or whether you call it a spell. Like there are so many things, whether it's the physical ritual or the intention, that there's so much crossover within the multi-Venn diagram of what faith is. So for me, it's not so much that I consider myself a person of faith with a capital F or with a hi, this is the symbol on the coexist sticker. Like I can't point to one that I neatly fit into. But for me, it's more of just been an internal relationship with whatever that inner voice is and really trusting within that and learning to discern more. For so long, I hated that word discernment because I was told from like age 5 or 6 that like told by prophets or elders that came through that I was someone who had a spirit of discernment. And I think really what that was is wasn't diagnosed with autism until my late 20s. And so I think it was less of having a spirit of discernment and more of I have pattern recognition and I'm asking a lot of questions. But now I see that even though it might not be what they were trying to tell me, it was what I needed to hear. I have a spirit of discernment. I have an internal intuition, an internal voice from the universe that every time I really listen to it and I trust within whatever that is, it has not steered me wrong. And so that has been, I think, the long version of my testimony.
That is so beautiful, Z. So many points in there. But I will say one of the things that stood out to me is that you said you didn't wrestle with God.
Yeah,
And
I
I
gave that
will
up.
be right. So I'm one of those queers that definitely wrestled with God. I was like, God, I'm not, what is this? What are you doing? Right. So we had you kind of a knockdown, drag out is the way that I tend to describe it. And so it's just so interesting to me, this idea of not wrestling, but observing and not tuning it out.
Yeah.
What was it like? Were you telling anyone about this observation or not tuning it out as you were doing it? How open were you about this kind of inner observation and relationship development that you were going through?
I do think I kept it pretty private because I think before we started recording, we were talking about how oftentimes, and even the title of today's podcast of like coming out Christian, um, it's exactly that of I didn't want to get the sideways glance or more of I think I gave that sideways glance for so long and sometimes that was earned. It wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction. It was, in fact, earned by the people who were receiving my little side eye. But I think it was less discussing it and more of, not only was I, instead of wrestling with God, I also stopped wrestling with Christians. I stopped trying to go toe to toe. I stopped trying to prove a point or out explain them, because when you grow up doing Bible drills, you end up knowing the text pretty well. And so if you're able to point out like mistranslations, or if you I stopped wrestling with Christians. I stopped trying to prove a point. I stopped trying to use logic. I stopped trying to do my Charlie from It's Always Sunny like map with like five red strings going everywhere. I stopped and I just started listening and observing and seeing, okay, what is the type of Christian that I want to surround myself with? It's not so much an aspiration of who I want to be, but more of who do I want in my community? Who do I want to be able to when, and I think this happened more in the last 5 or 6 years of who have I observed that, if not for me, but for someone else, who can I send them to? Who can, if someone is wanting to hold on, they're still wrestling with God and they don't want to let go, who can I point them to? Who can help kind of like mediate the thing? I'm just a ring girl. I'm just a ring girl being like, come over here, look at them. Whereas I'll let another Christian, a queer Christian who is affirmed in their faith and is I've seen through their actions. I've observed through the way that they lead their life. I'm seeing the light of Christ in them, the light of Christ that like the essence of that, not just the big title, but more of I see the work that they're doing not only within their career, because sometimes it's those people who might have those careers that don't allow them to really live out their values. Those ones are, it's like that to me is like, you're still wrestling. So I'm not going to send people to you. I'm going to send them to someone who is, it's not just their faith, it is their life. They have found a way to integrate their faith, and not just their faith, but the practice of community, the practice of caring for others, the actual love of Christ, love thy neighbor, and all of those pieces that are the essence of what Christ-like should be. Those are the folks that I, instead of talking about it with them, just more observed them. And then actually, transparently, I don't think I really talked about it until Ben passed me a mic. And that's when I really started talking about how I was in one place and then I kind of went quiet and just was in my observation phase. And now I'm in my space where I'm still very much observing, because I'm not going to be someone that I'm going to be able to affirm someone's Christian identity. I can tell them about my specific journey, but I have so many friends that I can be like, hey, go talk to Dr. Ben, go talk to Siobhan, go talk to insert the lovely board from Love Boldly that I've gotten to know. So I'm very fortunate in that I don't pigeonhole myself as the end all be all resource. And that's a practice that I'm trying to put into other spaces within my life. Um, but specifically within the faith space, when some of it can be triggering, when I'm hearing people repeat rhetoric that is still tender to me, I know that I can lean on my brothers and sisters and siblings of faith, that I can pass this person on because they've built up that armor that for me, I don't know if that armor is ever going to be there. And it's not for lack of trying, but I'm also not going to disparage myself that I'm not hard, and that there is a level of rebellion and softness. And there's a level of rebellion of me saying, this might not ever be something that I'm able to discuss. This might always be triggering. And I'm not, as someone who is living with CPTSD, I'm also applying this to my religious trauma of this might always be tender, and that is all right. I'm going to let other folks who are more experienced take the lead, and that's okay. So I think the original question was did I talk about it? And I don't really think I did in the
Okay.
observation phase. In the practice phase, I think I talked about it more.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that give that you said that it's okay
Yeah,
for these traumas to remain tender.
yeah.
There are definitely, even physically, sometimes you
Oh my
don't
God.
fully heal from a wound. I know my wife has an ankle that's going to start hurting every time it rains, right?
Yeah,
It's always going to be triggered by that rain, and that's okay. That's okay. That doesn't make you any less of a faithful person, of a person who's trying to live out that light of Christ.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ben, did you have a question?
No, I've just been kind of sitting back listening, and I always love when Z talks about their background, their faith. Um, And I wonder if you could discuss with us a bit, Z,
Yeah.
um, about what your faith, what your spirituality, whatever you want to call it, looks like now. Because
Yeah.
I know you've told me this before, and I just feel like it's something that our listeners would also value.
Yes, for me, I see more of looking at, okay, what that essence that I talked about earlier, the essence of what does it mean to be Christ-like or a light of Christ, of those acts of community, of making sure that we are just lending a helping hand. So parables like the Good Samaritan and things like that, making sure that we are turning tables in the temple when we need to. So those pieces really for me really stand out. Um, I did just lose the question because I started thinking of the temple and then I completely lost it. I'm so sorry.
No
The
worries. I
temple
know
will do
worries.
that.
The temple will do that.
The
Flipping
temple
tables
will
will
do
do
that.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, feel free to talk more about flipping tables and that relation to faith. But no, I was just asking about, how you kind of make sense of your faith, spirituality, whatever you want to call that,
Thank
that
you.
you have now and that you live out, you live through now.
I'm back. I'm back online. Thank you so much. Um, Oftentimes, I think something that I tried to kind of suppress because I was so tied to the specificity of the Pentecostal faith is physical ritual. Within the Pentecostal faith, there's everything from prayer cloths, which quite literally was just my mom was cutting up a twin size sheet and linen and anointing it with oil that had been prayed over. And so there were these I would label them as like physical talismans or intention pieces that hold the intention, oftentimes not only of one person, but an entire congregation. An entire congregation is putting intention into a physical object. That is powerful. And as much as I might not be ascribed to that now, I do believe in the power of a group of people setting intention. And I also believe in the power of me as an individual setting my intention. And just because I'm using that word, intention, doesn't mean that that couldn't be a synonym for prayer or for spell. For me, it's more of I know that I don't have a prayer life in the kneel by my bed with my hands folded and saying a limerick or something. But for me, it's more of a consistent conversation with that head voice that I ignored for so long. And sometimes that physical manifestation might not be anointing a cloth. Sometimes it's if I feel emotional heaviness coming home, because as much as I love the work that I do and the community that I get to engage with, sometimes, like I was talking about earlier, can be really triggering, whether it is someone talking about their experience as someone being traumatized by religion, or sometimes it's someone talking about their experience of having mental health issues or thoughts of suicide or self-harm. And I myself, I sometimes see myself so often in the community that I serve, and not even the community that I serve, but just even going out on like the weekend. I see other people that they share with me, and I don't know if it's my face, maybe I smile too much, wear too much pink. That is a quote from True HBO's True Blood. That is a throwback for anyone.
Love it.
Pam is
Love
my
it.
favorite character. Maybe I wear too much pink, but people tell me about their stuff. And oftentimes, I don't know if it's, and as I'm saying it, maybe it is that light of Christ, or maybe it is that whatever it is, but people tell me stuff, and sometimes it can weigh me down. But sometimes, even if it might scientifically not do a single thing, and it is what it is, but I might do light an incense stick and just like set my intention of whatever's on me is not welcome here. And I'll do an incense cleansing, a fire cleansing. Sometimes I might do a simmer pot. I might throw some herbs and some cinnamon and some citrus in a simmer pot. And while I'm stirring my simmer pot, set intention of this is cleansing my atmosphere. This is cleansing my home. I am taking a moment within this physical space as well as in my intention setting that I am I am warding off or I am praying. Uh, God, what is the language that my parents would use? Like I'm fortifying my house because I have to hold my peace. And as much as I want to say like that's witchcraft and that doesn't come from anything, all these things are so intertwined. I mean, if we are going to transform a cracker into the flesh of our deity and literally consume it, that is witchcraft. And so, as much as that seems so separate from what I'm doing, that is so very much intertwined. And that's because of this archetypal nature of humans existing within people. They might have not called themselves people of faith. They might have just been like, we are devotees or we are acolytes, but they're synonyms. They are synonyms for something similar. So as much as my stuff might be more witchy, esoteric, it is very much still it's a prayer life. It is being in touch and trying to be more intentional about communing with that inner voice. Um, and right now I don't have a name for her, but a lot of stuff involving the goddess Hecate, which is the goddess of witchcraft, has come up not only within pop culture, with shows like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, as well as things like Disney Plus's Agatha All Along, as well as everything from like TikTok ads for medallions of just Hecate comes up for me quite a bit. And so as I'm continuing to learn more about maybe a more organized or historical frame of reference for setting intention, that is somewhere that I'm starting to explore. But I'm not to say that I'm a devotee of Hecate. But I will say that her name comes up a lot, and what she represents and what she protects is very much in line with my experience. So right now it's very much free range witchcraft, but we might be looking into, joining a coven or something soon, y'all.
Can I say, I just want to observe that you have a Pentecostal background. I also have a Pentecostal apostolic background. And the idea of witchcraft within the Pentecostal church, right? Like there is just, I feel we talk about witchcraft a lot, I think because Pentecostals believe in the power
Yes.
of spells and intention.
Yeah.
And so I just want to observe that as the child of two Pentecostal ministers, how have
Yeah.
you gotten over what I have felt as a giant hump? Well, but let me be clear. I'm a huge fan of vampires. I'm a huge fan of witches. And it rubs in a very
Hmm.
strange way against my Pentecostal background.
Yeah.
How does that rub for you at all? Or are you seeing the true relationship between witchcraft and these different pieces of Pentecostalism that you grew up with?
I will definitely chalk it up to autism because I think it's that pattern recognition of I've always noticed it. Like, why can I read Chronicles of Narnia, but I can't read Harry Potter? There's a witch. There's witchcraft in this, and this is okay, but this one's not okay. I can read Lord of the Rings, but I can't read Percy Jackson because it's a different set of deities. Like, none of it made sense to me. I was always asking questions and I always was drawing comparison between things. And so I would love to say that like this was an epiphany, but for me, they always felt so intertwined that it did take, I will say, it did take some time to shake off the kind of nervousness about it. I will say I will never touch a Ouija board. I don't need that. So there, I still do have some limits where it's like there are some things that I don't want to tap into. And it's not so much that I believe that a Hasbro board game can be so powerful, but I don't need to dip my toe into it. I'm fine. I'm okay with not doing that. But there are these other pieces that for me have always seemed intertwined. And there was a bit of oh, pattern recognition, and these are the same thing. Like we are casting a spell over these communion wafers and this giant tray of shot glasses of Welch's. Like this is witchcraft. Like I'm so sorry. It has always been some form of either spell casting or transfiguration. Like that's an entire fucking class at Hogwarts. Transfiguration. That's literally what we do every Sunday for some folks. For us, it was just special. But like it's always been tied to it. Like tracks. We used to hand out chick tracks. That's basically like oracle cards or tarot. Like for me, it's like there are so many through lines and so many things that are like they're so similar. It's just they are using a different name or they might not call it something. But to me, I'm like, let's call it what it is. It's waddling and quacking. So I think it's a duck.
Cozy. Love it. Just, I love that recognition and the fact that you've been able to just kind of lay those things out because you've recognized them. And I think I've seen them. but haven't been able to just name it so clearly
Yeah.
as you did now. That is amazing.
I do feel like some of it is also just like the kind of punk attitude about it of, oh, you said that this was so bad. And I'm not saying that I don't believe in it. I'm saying that I just, I don't think it's as dark-sided as you say it is. Like, if we're going to be talking about angels and demons and spirit as if it's real and treating it like it's real, okay, well, let's treat it like it's all real. So for me, it was less of stopping to believe and then restarting. It was more of just the, okay, well, the spirit can be broader. I don't need to focus on just one Holy Ghost. There are lots of Holy Ghosts. There's lots of energies out here. And it's just, hey, we can be open to it. And I think there's a reason that witchcraft and these moments of internal actualization are so heavily guarded by walks of faith that do have more rigid structures because they do believe in it and they know that it's real. And that's why they have to demonize it. And that's why they have to make it something that has very strict boundaries. It's because it is real for people. And so for me, it was more of leaning into it and getting kind of dark and deviant. And I think being a queer person and a sex positive person, I think deviance and the thought of hedonism also is something that I've really leaned into because I think that the reason that we have so many pleasure receptors that are going off is because they are meant to go off. So I think that there is a piece of spirituality that is definitely tied into that. And I think that's the reason that we try to make sure that people's bodies are being regulated and people's pleasure is being regulated. And it can only be in specific places because if you are having a life that is fulfilled and that is holistic, including for those of us who sex is affirming, that is a part of my spiritual life. Sex energy is a big piece of that. There is a practice of setting intention at your climax, your peak, and it's setting intention because that's when you're the like you're seething with energy. And so in that moment, being intentional of you are it's like you're charged up. So in that moment of if whether I am having solo time or whether I'm with a partner, sometimes I'll just be like, I want to focus on this. Oftentimes when I'm making love with my husband, it's I want to feel closer to him. I want I want our love and our relationship to go deeper. And so in that moment, that's the intention I'm setting. It's not always, oh, let that bill not come through right now. Sometimes it's, I want to be so close with this person. And the fact that the intention setting is happening during such a beautiful moment for me is it's all of it. It's all of it. My witchcraft and my faith doesn't stop whenever I'm fucking. It's a part of it. So I definitely think that leaning into it and that deviance piece, I think really was scary at first, but then made it all the more fun to lean into it. So yeah, there's definitely a through line between that Pentecostal esotericism and whatever we're doing now.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I think we could talk to you forever, Z. And I think we will have to have you back on to talk more about sex positivity, and being people of faith, being queer people, being
Yeah,
people of faith, and being sex positive, because we've been made to feel so much shame
that
around the topic of sex, and Christians in general just got a lot of ish to work out around sex, but we'll save that for another episode. We'll have you back,
perfect.
Z.
Would
But for
love
now,
to.
let's go into our query of the day. And today I want to ask you, and you brought up a few of these, Z, but you might have a few more. What were you not allowed to read, watch, or hear because of your religious upbringing? Um, I've got one that I can just share right away, and I wasn't even told. I'm kind of old, and so Harry Potter came out when I was probably in college, late high school, college, and I was like, oh, there's no way that I could read Harry Potter or see the movies or do anything because of my Pentecostal apostolic
Mhm.
background. And like this, yeah, all of this is just like off limits to
Yeah,
me. And then my mom was like, "Oh, I love Harry Potter. I've read all the books." And I'm like, "What? What? What? We can read Harry Potter?" And it just kind of it opened this very fake door, right? That door was
mm,
not there. There was no barrier there. It's a barrier that I had erected myself because of that upbringing and voices in my head. And then my mom said she was a huge Harry Potter fan, and it was, yeah. So, and then I got into it and I watched the movies, and my son and I built the Legos, and it was amazing.
Um, definitely Harry Potter was on that. I was I'm telling my age now. I was in the fourth grade whenever the first one popped off. And I was one of three of us that went into the hallway and prayed while our English teacher was doing a class reading. And that was not a letter, that was of our own choice. So that was self-regulated just because my parents had told me that like I had to avoid it at all costs. Um, I would say some other ones. Once Britney Spears did the Slave for You, there was like the VMA performance. My parents shut down not only Britney but all secular music. So from like whenever the self-titled Britney album came out until like I would say definitely 18. I was not allowed to openly listen to secular music in the house, which is like, luckily, there's a lot of gray area with folks like Reliant K and Toby Mac, where there is this almost like, is this Christian music? But luckily, there was quite a bit of that. I think there was like a renaissance of like pop punk, but Christian whenever I was in that space. So it's not like I wasn't eating good. I was getting plenty of pop culture, but it was just Christian pop culture. Seventh Day Slumber, like a lot of those like heavy metal Christian rock bands. So I was able to kind of like, as long as my parents looked at who the people were and they read the lyrics, I would have to get like, even if I had a friend, again, telling my age, burn me a mix CD, I had to look up all the lyrics and then let my parents see them so that I could have said, because it had to prove to them that it was quote unquote not secular music. That one was huge. I remember I got I think it was Sierra's first album, the one with goodies. Well, we don't want to do that. We don't want to get any copyright infringement. Anyway, my dad found my Walkman. God, I am a walking millennial today. And he
I love it.
carved into the CD, "Would Jesus listen to this?" And I didn't know it until I went to play it again. And then my dad was looking in the rearview mirror and like locked eyes with me and he goes, "Yeah, I listened to it. You snuck that one in, didn't you?" So music for me was such a huge piece of it, but like it was so pick and choose with my parents because Dolly Parton was fine. And of course she was. And oh my God, for my mom, Bob Seger was fine. And there were certain secular things that were okay that obviously my parents enjoyed from their childhood or whatever time they were listening to those artists. But I had a Berlin Wall of no secular music, no MTV, no VH1. Those were all blocked. After my parents saw Ed, Ed, and Eddy, I wasn't allowed to watch Cartoon Network anymore. So there were so many things that my parents and I love what you said of, oh, your mom loves this. Whereas my brother and I are 10 years apart. You best believe that child read the entire Harry Potter series, the entire Percy Jackson series. And I look at my parents and I'm like, what's up, guys? What's going on? Where's your conviction? And they're like, we're tired. And then my dad goes, and we're medicated now. And I'm like, you know what? I'm glad you're medicated. I'm glad we are working on this mental health journey. So I think we can acknowledge what you did was pretty wild and a little nonsensical back in my day.
Shout out to parents being medicated. Just kind of
Right.
just say,
Let's
ooh, okay.
let's get him in
Uh,
therapy and have some, self actualization and emotional intelligence, and maybe we'll be good to go.
love it. Reverend
Shade to my
Dr.
parents on a
Ben.
podcast. I love that.
So I grew up in a very different household than apparently the two of you did. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were Roman Catholic. Um, so, but my parents really didn't put any limits on anything that, we could read or not read. I mean, the only time I can remember either one of my parents saying, you should not read this is if you remember, and again, dating myself, um, you remember the like best or great illustrated classics or whatever that were like dumbed down versions of like Great Expectations and Oliver Twist and whatnot. My mom took those away from me. We were like, no, you're going to read the actual one, not the kiddie version with pictures, the actual one. Um, but I mean, I was the kid in high school who, again, on burned CDs and whatnot, listened to all Christian music, while my parents down the hall were listening to stuff that they listened to in college. I mean, my mom and I finally bonded over Van Morrison, and my dad was a huge Styx fan. And I mean, my parents had really good musical taste. When my sister came along and actually had a fully punk phase for like 5 or 6 years and listened to like Good Charlotte and Green Day and all those kinds of groups, it was my parents who, not just to annoy her or to embarrass her, but they actually listened to it. It was like, this is really good music. So on like road trips and whatever, I would be in the back seat with my little, portable CD player listening to, um, Jars of Clay and Chris Tomlin and whoever, while my parents have on the car's radio are listening to Good Charlotte. And it was just, I mean, that is how I grew up. Um, and to tell you the truth, it was not until my senior year of college that I figured out who Bob Dylan was.
Oh, Ben. Oh, Ben. So, two things. First, I think that this is going to be a piece of evidence for my family members who used to tell me that Catholics weren't Christian. It's the lack of regulation of what your children listen to is going to be one of the pieces of evidence there. And then number two is that the level of self-regulation from the three of us. And I just want to say that there's something about that. Like we were raised to be self-regulating humans. Like something got through to us there.
Yeah, the fear of Christ, at least in my
Oh
in my
yeah.
case.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say for the record, my parents have always been more progressive than most of the other, kids' parents growing up. I had a copy of Catcher in the Rye in my backpack that I took with me and pulled out at some point at a friend's house, and her mother was to me in a heartbeat, pulling it out of my hands and saying, "I can't believe your parent. When they find out, they're going to be so mad at you." And I'm thinking, well, only if you knew that my mother was the one who gave it to me and told me to read it. But she confiscated. I never did get that copy back. So I definitely had friends whose parents were regulating the household much more than than my parents were, in a lot of ways.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, thanks, Karen. All right, Ben, will you take us into our moment in queer Christian history? This is our weekly reminder that not only have we always been here, we have always been here in the church.
Sure. One thing that I've mentioned, or a group that I've mentioned in some of my previous moments in queer Christian history, is the LGBTQ Religious Archives Network, or LRAN. LRAN is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit that works to document, preserve, record queer religious history. They don't just work with Christians; they work with people from any faith. Um, but their website, which I'll put in the description for this episode, has an incredible amount of resources. They've done a lot of work in making sure that um, archives that relate to queer religious history that are at some risk in paper form are digitized. They also have a great resource of profiles of queer religious history, or queer religious leaders, mostly from the 20th and 21st centuries, that either were written by friends of those people or by those people themselves, including some of the folks actually that Love Boldly works with here in Central Ohio are included in those profiles. But again, they do a huge amount of work at making sure that the history of queer religious voices are not lost. They were an organization that came out of a period right after the height of the AIDS crisis, and they witnessed how many folks had been involved in queer religious spaces that had been lost to AIDS, and we really wanted to make sure that that history was not lost in ways that it has been in other points of history.
Amazing. Well, that is wonderful. So, everyone, check out that archive. Go digging in there, find out a little bit of your queer religious history right there at that archive. All All right, we've had an amazing episode with Z, but we do have to wrap it up for today. Well, get out there, enjoy that spring weather if that's your thing, or come out in June when it's going to be a lot warmer. See us throughout the month of June at Pride. Thank you, Z. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Ben. And we will see you next week on Coming Out Christian.
Thank you for listening to Coming Out Christian with Siobhan Boyd Nelson and me, Ben Hillscamp. Do you want to see content like this continue to be produced? Then please support Love Boldly with a donation and consider becoming a monthly donor. You can donate online at www.loveboldly.net/donate. Join us next time as we continue to engage with people who proudly say that we're here, we're queer, and we love the Lord. And we're not going anywhere.